start this show. So, all right. I got my, well, hi there. Welcome to the 24th Gutenberg Times live Q&A. My name is Birgit Polly-Haag, and I'm your host and the curator of Gutenberg Times. Thank you all for joining us today. Chandrika from Cupertino in California. That's really great. Thanks for being here. And Bud from New Jersey. Well, hope you're all good. In today's show, we will discuss what's this new block directory, its genesis and how it works. We all talk about the guidelines and the block plugin checker. I like that, block plugin checker. We have an awesome panel for you today with 3 developers from the Meta team and longtime WordPress contributors. And I am pleased to introduce you to Kelly Dwan, JavaScript engineer at Automatic, on loan to the Meta team. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So Kelly, what's your role on the block directory? Just briefly.
So, like you said, I'm a JavaScript developer, so I worked a lot on integrating it into Gutenberg and making it work with the editor.
Awesome. And we will later on have a demo from you about how it works. Also with us this morning, Alex Shiels, developer and code archaeologist at Automatic and team rep on the Meta team for many years. Thank you for being on the show a second time, Alex.
Thank you for having me again.
Well, absolutely, I'm so glad. And last but certainly not least, Samuel Otto Wood, developer at Audrey, WordPress guardian of the community and the plugin repository, and also developer on the Meta team. Many people in the WordPress community just know you as Otto. So I hope it's okay that I on the show also address you as Otto.
All my friends call me Otto as well.
All right. So how long have you been working on WordPress, Otto?
14 years, 10 of them full-time.
Wow, that's longer than Alex.
It's quite a long time, yes.
Wow, yeah. Alex was number 12 or something like that on Automatic?
Yeah, around about there. Yeah, 13 years, I guess. So yeah, you beat me, Otto.
Hey, you know, it's not a competition.
No, it's not. But I'm so glad to have you all here, and thanks for taking the time today. So before we start, I have an announcement and a few housekeeping notes. So tomorrow we will record the 26th episode of the Gutenberg Changelog podcast, and we'll cover Gutenberg plugin 8.7 release notes and have more details on the block editor changes for WordPress 5.5. Co-host Mark Urain and I will also answer listener questions and talk about community contribution, plugins, themes, tutorials, and the ecosystem of WordPress. And drum roll, new virtual events formats are coming to WordPress. So stay tuned. We will have the peak view on it tomorrow when we record it, and it will be, if you haven't subscribed yet, you can find the Gutenberg Changelog podcast on any of the popular podcast apps. It will be released, we record tomorrow, and then it will be released over the weekend. Probably Saturday, but sometimes it takes us until Sunday. Speaking of questions, for those of you watching this on the YouTube live stream, use the chat box next to the video player to pose your questions and include where you're watching from. Here on Zoom, use the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen or the chat bubble to share your thoughts and questions. And please be kind, even if you disagree. This is a family-friendly endeavor. Well, okay, so let's start at the beginning. Why was that block directory actually started? Yeah, why was that necessary, or why would it be? Is it such a great way to install new blocks?
Well, It came from Matt's, what was it, nine projects for 2019, one of which was a new way to seamlessly install new functionality into WordPress using the editor without leaving the editor. And that's basically turned into the block directory. The idea that you can install a WordPress plugin or more specifically a block without ever having to go to the plugin screen or go to WordPress.org or anything like that. You can just search and add it like you would a block that's already available in core.
Well, that sounds really awesome. So are you ready, Kelly? Do you want to do a little demonstration so we all start from the same platform, so to speak, on knowledge?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be great. So I say hi, Susan from Israel. Susanne, actually, she's German. We had some connections. And did you share the YouTube? Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going over there and look also so I don't miss any
can't share my
question
screen.
from the. You cannot share your
I
screen?
cannot, no.
Why? Nobody gives you oops. Oh, all panelists should be able to share screens. Try it again.
There we go.
All right.
I think.
We won. We beat the technology. All right.
I'm having a little technical difficulties. It's just going to take me a second to do this. Sorry.
Well, it's take your time. We're staying here with you.
I need to give it permission, and I can't do that unless I quit and restart Zoom. I don't know, Alex. Do you want to do a demo, or should I rejoin?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
Give me a few seconds here. I think I can share my screen.
You know, if you ever consider what needs to happen that this all works, it's actually a miracle that it works so often very well. Yeah, it's mind-boggling to me. Every time I started working on the internet, which is about.
I've got the exact same issue as Kelly,
Oh.
I think.
Maybe they changed their permissions.
Yeah, I think they must have.
The Zoom changed permissions?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, the app, I think perhaps when you install a new version or update it or something, it wants to.
Yeah. So we're all going out and coming back? Or
Sure. Do you want to do that, Kelly?
Sure.
Okay.
Can I just rejoin with that same link?
Yeah, please. Okay. Yeah, that's your Kelly Dwan link.
All right. I will be back.
Okay. Yeah. So while we're waiting for Kelly to come back, maybe Alex, you can say, okay, what are the moving parts that are kind of make it quite a complex undertaking in the back end of things? It will be very easy for a block editor, but in the back end, there's a lot of moving parts that need to play together.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't downplay the complexity on the block editor side. I mean, we've tried very hard to make it seamless and look very simple from the user's perspective. So certainly from a UI point of view, it just looks almost like you're inserting a regular block. But yeah, on the back end, we've had to do a lot of testing and validation and so on to make sure that block plugins are going to be compatible and actually technically work with the inserter, because it turns out there's a fair few restrictions that need to be in place. As much as we'd love to be more open about allowing everything, we've had to keep it very small just so it's actually going to work. So Kelly, are you about ready? You can perhaps show us what we're talking about.
Yeah, I can share now. So here. Okay, you should be seeing WordPress.
Yeah, I see it.
Excellent. Okay, so this is just a dev install WordPress. So this will be what people see when they install WordPress 5.5. So no plugins installed or anything. We'll go over to posts. and pick up editing a post that I started. Okay. My local install is being slow now. So, all right, here we go. Now that we're in the editor, if we want to install a new block, or we want to look for something that we don't have locally, we don't even realize that we're installing a new block. All we have to do is search for what we're looking for. So maybe I want to create a cool like header area with some interesting gradients. So I can search for gradients. And that will, initially it searches through the installed blocks, but if it can't find anything, it goes off and looks for anything from the block directory on WordPress.org. So now we see that we have these two results. We have waves and starscape. These both sound kind of interesting, but maybe I'll try waves first. So I just click add block. And behind the scenes, it's installing the plugin for me, but I don't need to know that. So it is slow, I think, because I'm also doing this video, but it is usually faster than this.
Well, video takes up a lot of CPU. So
yeah, there we go. So now I have this waves block. I can move this. I can control it. It's installed. It's like it's a block that has been installed the whole time. But maybe I decide I don't really like the way this looks. So I could remove it. And maybe let's look for something else. Oh, so that's going to show me waves? No, okay. So I removed it. I think it's saved, so it removed waves. Now I'll try the starscape block. And we'll wait for that to install too. And again, this is like transparent to the user. No one needs to understand what's going on behind the scenes, but behind the scenes, we are going and installing the plugin and inserting it into the editor. So now I love this like star night sky thing. So we'll definitely go with this. I can enter some text here. That was supposed to say title, but my computer is not responding very fast.
Well, I'm glad that not everybody is a good typer in demo situations.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I can type to save my life.
So if I save this post, you can see that on the front end, which is going to be too slow, so I don't think I'm going to go see it, that it would have that starscape block, but we can also go over to plugins, and it should have it so that only starscape is still installed, despite you having tried waves. Since you didn't end up using it, it's not just installing and installing plugins for you.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So only starscape.
Right. Yeah.
that's very cool.
Wow. Yeah. So we are not ending up with 280 blocks.
Right. You are free to try as many things as you'd like, and then only what's used in that post should be left installed.
All right. That's excellent. So, well, maybe we want to take it. We don't have any questions yet, but you can, of course, after this demo, there might be a lot of questions in your head. Yeah, use the Q&A on the bottom of the screen and put them there. And until you do, I take my privilege that I'm the host of the show and ask all those questions that I have. So there are a few. So you started talking about the moving parts. So one of the moving parts is the plugin directory, and it needs to have a certain category of blocks, or how is that organized?
Alex, do you want to answer that, or should I?
Sure, I'll get started. Yeah, it's essentially there's like a category within the plugin directory for block plugins. And we've just recently added a tool, the block checker, which you mentioned earlier, that plugin developers can use if they've written a block plugin that they think is maybe suitable for this, a nice simple JavaScript only or JavaScript mostly block. They can use this block checker to check their plugin and just click a button to add it to the block directory. And from their point of view, that's about all there is to it. I mean, there's you know, certain restrictions and guidelines they need to abide by to make sure it's actually going to work. But yeah, on the back end, it's all powered by the plugin directory. These are just a particular type of plugin. And yeah, Otto, did you want to expand on that?
I mean, you pretty much nailed the basics. It's really just sort of internally, it's sort of a taxonomy, a tag that we use to differentiate these specific single block plugins that should show up in the block inserter. And we can expose that through WordPress.org. I think we do. I'm not 100% on that right now, but
yeah, we do. Yeah,
there is a way to expose those so you can browse them and view them and things like that. But realistically, the main thing was that they needed to be, at least for the first iteration, they need to be very simple and very basic plugins. So the block, the checker that you were talking about is like the most important part of, at least from the plugin directory side, the most important part of this whole venture, because we need them to be simple and straightforward and not add anything and just be very basic, almost JavaScript only plugins. And I think that was literally the hardest part of creating this system, which these two people did. Thank you very much for doing that.
So there are a few. So Bud Krause already has a question, and he writes, the block directory assumes users have a certain UI vocabulary. If a user doesn't know they need an accordion, they can't search for it. Are there any plans for a browse blocks feature kind of thing?
Well, obviously browsing is built in, but I think that as far as searching goes, we have to see what happens first. If people are searching for terms, then we need to sort of come up with a vocabulary of what people are searching for in order to show them things that are most relevant to their answers. So I'm not sure what a synonym of accordion would be in this case, but yeah, once we get some search done and record the queries on it, then we could probably come up with some kind of way to make things more obvious and work better in terms of giving users better results. I mean, currently the plugin directory is using Elasticsearch. The block directory probably uses the same search, but a much more limited search, obviously. I'm not 100%
right now.
on how
it's right now it's using a very limited search, but we are very shortly about to switch it over to Elasticsearch. So
yeah, exactly. We can probably do something like that, and it will recognize terms and synonyms, things like that, that the plugin directory already has, just, you know, not there yet. We're getting there. It's one step at a time.
Well, one thing is also that the plugin developer can put some categories or some keywords into the block itself. Yeah, so to take care of that as well. And
sure, tags is the tag system is basically how they do that.
Yeah, yeah. So we have more questions. Susanna has, can I adjust the editor different for different roles? I'm assuming there's kind of, contributor to editor to author to administrator. I think the block directory has some capabilities, restrictions there.
The block editor, as far as or the block inserter, as far as I know, is tied to the plugin install. You have to be able to install a plugin to install a block. So right now I think it's the same. I'm not sure if it's separate and then just tied to it, but
no, it's the same. It's using install block plugin or something like that. So it's only, I guess, I think it's only admins.
So administrator only, basically, is what by default install plugin is. If we are able to create a system where those plugins are very limited and we can prove that they're very limited, then that might be expanded in the future. It's an idea. Maybe we could come up with a separate role install block or something like that.
Yeah.
And that way it would be basically the same, but since we know it's a limited block plugin that can't do anything, then possibly
well, it can do a lot, but
or that can't do anything dangerous. Plugins are very strong. They can do a lot of things. If we're going to limit it to blocks that are very limited in what they can do, maybe a sandbox kind of atmosphere, then there's a possibility we could have it install by users less than administrator, by editors or authors, maybe not authors, contributors, something to that effect.
Yeah.
Editors at least. So.
Yeah, and John Richards has a question that beyond the turning the feature on and off, is there a hook to add filters to limit what plugins are available for the site user to install? I don't see that that's yet implemented in the block editor.
I don't believe so. It's just right now searching for a very specific limited category.
Right.
And we don't have a lot of block plugins there yet. So
4 pages or 5 pages.
Yeah, it's pretty limited. It's less than 100, but
it's about 85, I think, at the moment.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So
now,
I mean, that could be filtered. There's probably filters there to do it, but they're not specifically there for that purpose.
Yeah, I think the block editor only has in the theme you can allow certain core blocks or the theme blocks, but not for the block directory yet. So Ian Misner has a permission that defaults to the same restriction, but can be changed with the role editor, would give the site owner the choice. Well, the site owner normally has administrative privileges to install plugins. So, but if they have editors, then I don't know if the user response capabilities plugin kind of can add that to it without having, not the plugin,
Well,
Sorry.
if the capability doesn't exist in core, then just adding it with a plugin wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
But at some point, as the block editor expands, new capabilities would probably be added for it. At present, there's nothing there for that.
So we have a question from Marius Jensen. It's a more quite a deep technical one, I think. Would it then technically be possible to have blocks be installed with an official CDN for the JS code itself, so you do not need to install the block code locally on your site's server? I see you smiling, Alex.
That's initially how it worked. We were actually loading the JavaScript from the WordPress CDN. But about a month ago, I guess, we switched that to loading locally to fix up or to help with various sorts of problems that we were running into. Do you want to expand on that a bit, Kelly?
Sure. So let's see. I think there's 2 parts to this, which is that you still do need to have probably need to have some PHP installed from the plugin if you're doing anything with like an API call, so you can't just rely on JavaScript CDN things. And so that was one thing that we were running into. And then the other issue was just with, I think, asset detection, was we weren't consistently finding those JavaScript files, and loading things locally made that a little easier. Would you say that's about what the problem were?
Okay.
Yeah, and we ran into those problems with translation as well. I mean, in a perfect world, if we design this from the ground up, independent of WordPress plugins, then we probably could have done it from a CDN. But plugins being so flexible, there's so many different ways of initializing code and loading things and so on, that we just found it, pretty much impossible to only load it from a CDN. So installing the plugin actually lets us find all of those assets and initialization things and so on that are needed for it to actually work.
Yeah, I can see that yeah, being in an existing ecosystem is so much easier than kind of starting a new one, even if the new one would be new ground and new innovation or something like that. And that can still happen. There is an initiative actually out of Netherlands that have this Gutenberg block repository that works for that. If you install a plugin on WordPress, or a plugin on Drupal, and then it would kind of tab into both in that particular directory, and you can download it. But I think they didn't get anywhere yet because there's not a whole lot of traction on that. Yeah. So Ian has another question, a follow-up question. Will the queries that people, no, it's a new question. Will the queries that people are using be available anywhere for developers to help assess what needs to be built? That's an interesting question, Ian. Thank you.
At present, we're not even recording them. So no, but until we record them, the answer is a very simple no. Because 5.5 is not out, we don't know where it's going yet. So we don't record data we don't know that we need. A lot of people think WordPress records a whole lot of stats and information. That is not true. We throw away most stats, most queries. We don't record things until we need them. So at the point we need them, we'll record them and make that available. But until we need them, we don't have that information. No.
Okay. So, so we have the moving parts. We have the plugin directory. Should we talk about the guidelines, the 8 guidelines that you had for, or what makes a good block to get into the directory and use? Besides the block checker, there were a few things, like you had some 8 rules. One is block plugins are for the block editor, which we established. Block plugins are separate blocks. Plugin titles should be reflecting in the block title. So when someone looks for something that it's not the brand or the trademark or something like that, it's actually that the user know what they're getting. It must include the block.json file. And then it's must not require payment or a paid account to function. And block plugin should work independently, and server-side code should be to a minimum, but not promote other blocks, plugins, or themes. Those are the preliminary guidelines. How do you feel about that? And Bud, we go to your question right after that. So do you have, so I have a few questions about that. The block.json file, can you help us with that?
So the block.json file is something that users don't need to worry about, but for developers, it contains the metadata, like the title and block name and those kinds of things, the JavaScript path name and so on, for a block. It's currently possible for blocks to work without one of these, but we would really like developers to use this metadata for their blocks, because it means everything's in one place. Going forward, it will help with Gutenberg itself as a more consistent way of initializing blocks.
Standard format.
Yes, single place standard format for all of this stuff, so we can pick it up for indexing it in the plugin directory, in the block directory. It'll all be there when the block gets inserted seamlessly, and it means you're not duplicating stuff between JavaScript code and PHP code and everything. It's all in one spot.
Yeah, I think in WordPress 5.5 there is actually the feature in there to use the block JSON for your PHP code as well, register block type code as well. So yeah, excellent. So Bud Krause has the question. So if a user installs a block from the directory but doesn't like it and wants a different but similar block, they can't get access to it because the search recognizes the previously installed block. What plans are there to resolve this rather than just uninstall the block, which is an inelegant thing to do? I think what Bud is asking is for a user triggered kind of search in the block directory. Kelly, do you have an answer for that?
I don't have an answer. I know you created an issue in GitHub for this, though.
I did.
So I think it's something that would happen in the future, but not for right now. You can't, if a existing block matches the search term, it will not search the block directory.
And I think that makes sense in the first iteration to kind of keep it that restrictive, or make it, why would you search for them? Use what you have. Why install additional things? I get it. But I can see that that is further down the road. Certainly something you would, I think Mark also put some designs together to how that could flow. Well, thanks, but that was a very good question. And I'll share the GitHub issue number in the show notes, so to speak, so you can all advocate for it. That's how it works in WordPress. You need to have good arguments and discussions about things. So I'm just looking through the other questions right now. There was another question that I had out of those guidelines. Server-side code should be kept to a minimum. Did you find a number for that, or can you first kind of explain a little bit how you measure that, and then what is a good number, and how do you check that?
That's a great question. We have put in some arbitrary numbers into the block checker. So if it's more than so many kilobytes of PHP code, it tells you it's probably not a good idea. It's really not about the size, though. We'll refine those checks as we can. The reason for us wanting to limit the amount of PHP code is because if your block is too reliant on PHP, it just won't work in the inserter. It's it would rely on a refresh of the page essentially for it to work.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we have used some arbitrary limits on, I don't know if it was 50 kilobytes or something. If there's more than that amount of PHP code in there, it will start to warn you about it. But that's very much just a stopgap. If we could in some way check and make sure that the PHP would actually work, then we would do something much more specific like that. And I do hope to refine the block checker over time so that we can be more helpful than just saying, here's the cutoff. Yeah,
the block checker is actually also working with a plugin that is not yet in the repository, so you can actually put your GitHub repo URL into it, and it checks it from there. That's really marvelous. Yeah, I loved it when I tried it out with my plugin that has a lot of bugs, but it would pass the block checker. Speaking of PHP and minimum, there is one type of block that a lot of people use. That's a dynamic block. So things are in the database, but they render it in PHP. Is that all kind of included in that, or is there a stopgap there?
Yeah, so that kind of block won't work at all. It really needs to be a JavaScript rendered block. And again, I mean, this is not because we hate PHP. I'm a PHP developer from way back. It's simply because of what's technically possible. If it's going to work seamlessly as soon as you insert a block like that, it's really got to be JavaScript mostly.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'd actually say that if you're using a dynamic block, you're using server-side render to render it, it should still work in the block directory, because that's actually an API call. It doesn't need to reload the page. So that rendering is done because the plugin is already installed. It's done locally, and that actually passes. I think that some of those can kind of have some, like if you need to set it up somewhere else, that's when it won't work in the editor. It needs to be
right if it has configuration.
Right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this, at least this first draft of the block directory, it's all about getting the blocks that are mostly user interface. If you get right down to it, a block is basically just a user interface to create some very simple HTML. usually, not always. It can be more complex, but it's a JavaScript interface to give a user interface to make HTML simpler. And that works better if it's in the browser, as opposed to having to go back to the server every time and be slower.
Yeah.
So JavaScript for this particular, for blocks, is better. Not always the case. Some more complicated things are fine, but you know, those can be added later to the block directory or to other plugins that do a lot of server processing or anything like that.
Yeah, I understand. That's yeah, interesting. Yeah. So William Patton has a question: could we have a previewer for blocks that is outside the editor, something like the theme previewer?
We actually did some experiments with this this idea early on, and it is something I'd like to revisit. One of the initial ideas for inserting the block into the editor was to basically insert a preview rather than the actual block. We went down a different road. But yeah, I think we probably will revisit that idea at some point. I really like the idea that you could go look at these blocks in the plugin directory on the website and see the block itself and maybe even interact with it and try it out there as well. I mean, whether that's a really important path for users to follow, maybe not. I mean, the whole idea is that you can do all this from the editor. So we haven't spent a lot of time on the website because it's, you know, it's kind of a secondary thing. But sure, we'll probably revisit that idea. I don't exactly know where the other than on the website where the preview would be shown, perhaps in a block management screen or something like that. But yeah, we've got a bit of code hanging around somewhere that we could dig back out and try and refresh.
Yeah, there is so blocks that are already installed, when you hover over them, you get a preview panel in the inserter. Yeah, and so the question would be, before you install it, can you see the preview? That's kind of where it would help the user to decide, is that something that I want to install? Does it do what it's supposed to do? So that would be really helpful.
That could be something you could put into the block JSON, which we could deliver via the API. So it's totally possible.
Yeah, I can see, like, the plugins have the screenshot part. Yeah, so you can see that normal plugins. But for the preview, you could just put an asset in there, and then it kind of can push through that. Would be an interesting way to do that. Yeah. So John Richards has another question. Have you thought about how the block directory might evolve as Gutenberg begins to include widgets and navigation? Somebody wants to take that?
I mean, I've thought about it. I have no idea where it's going, but I have thought about it. Full site editing is a confusing thing that is still being developed. So until we know where themes are going, it's a little hard to guess where the block directory has to go. Once we have an idea of what a full site edited theme looks like, then it's a little easier to determine, okay, well, what kind of blocks do we need? How do we integrate these in? So on. It's an evolving thing. I've seen some really neat stuff made with the beta full site editor in Gutenberg, but I haven't seen anything that is quite production ready. So yeah, one thing at a time is really what I would say on that. Once themes change, then blocks will adapt to fill the space that is needed for them. Since blocks are fairly simple, really, when you get right down to it, I think that the block directory idea can evolve to adapt. But yeah, no idea. It's up in the air.
Yeah, I can't. So I have a question for another part of the guidelines, where that it needs to be an independent functioning block. But there are, I think, a few in there in the directory that I saw that actually have a parent and child relationship. So they have one block, and then kind of other additional children in there, like an FAQ. I haven't seen an FAQ yet, but I think that's kind of coming with soon. Anybody will pick it up. So how does that work?
You mean like the nested block idea?
Yeah.
As far as I know, those are fine. Those are still one block. They just have separate sections in that block. So I have to admit, I'm not as familiar with the JavaScript as I should be, but those are still one block. So they can fit in the block directory just fine. Yeah, they're blocks within blocks.
Yeah, it's one parent block. And that's the important part, is that there's one FAQ. And then it may contain some like question and answer blocks, but those aren't exposed as like top level. So it's all still one block to the block directory.
Oh, I understand you cannot have a question block without the overall FAQ block.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, okay. Yeah, so that was one. The other part was on the independent functioning is if I want to have Google Maps on there, and Google Maps now also requires for that you not necessarily always, but also a Google API key that you need to put in. And if it's in the interface and you don't have to go out of the block editor to pick that, is that possible that those blocks are getting into the block directory?
I would say it's likely they're getting in at the moment. This is the kind of nuance that really we just need to work out, I think. I mean, the idea is for this to be seamless, and I'd really love it if we could make these things work, or if developers could make these things work where you don't have to go and sign up and get an API key and go through a whole bunch of hoops like that. If it would just work with a click, that'd be fantastic. But of course, you know, this is the real world, and it doesn't always work that way. So we'll figure out ways of sort of refining these guidelines and recommendations so that, you know, we can deal with reasonable things like this.
Yeah.
Well, also ultimately, all plugins get reviewed before being added. So if somebody has a really good reason to have something there that has an API key entry in the block itself or something, you know, we'll take a look at it. The plugin review team will look at it and see what's what. And until we have those submitted and to see what plugin authors come up with in terms of user interface, it's hard to say. Whoever comes up with the best user interface wins. So
yeah.
This is open source. Feel free to build whatever you like and we'll take a look at it. So
yeah, that's kind of the challenge for the plugin developers now, to kind of find out what works and what users need. So what about block variations? So I could have one block and then 16 different variations. Would that still work?
Yeah, if your variations are on the block that you're submitting, then yeah, they'll work because that's still just one block to the block directory.
Oh, okay. So if I had variations, I have my block, and then I have variations to the core blocks. That would be two different things.
If your plugin only added variations to the core blocks, that wouldn't work, because when you're like, if you think about the demo I just did, if you added the block that's just variations, there's nothing to show up in the editor. So it needs to expose a single block that can be added to the editor.
Sure. Variations are additions to blocks, not blocks themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you can have one block and then add a bunch of variations to it, all in the same plugin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, that's cool. Yeah. Is there any consideration about block patterns? Is that the same story then, or is it, well, block patterns are actually coming from core blocks, right? And then, but you could put them in the inserter at some point, but does it already work through the block directory?
So I think they're right now, they're two separate features. Mm-hmm. Block patterns just being kind of a collection of blocks you can add. There isn't a connection to the block directory at the moment, but potentially down the road, we could have something like that, where if you add a pattern that has a block that you don't have installed, maybe it knows to go and look in the block directory. That would be cool.
Yeah, It would be.
Block
yeah.
patterns are still kind of new. It's sort of a template of blocks put together. So
it's going to be new in 5.5. Nobody has a whole lot of people have seen it, but a lot of people have not seen it yet.
It's new to the point where we haven't built an API for it. So the idea of it is clever. I don't know where it's going. So until we know what's needed, we don't have a block patterns directory. So this is just for blocks for now.
Yeah. So we're still having a few minutes on our time here together. So if you have last minute question, or well, we have another 10 minutes. So and I just gonna have another question for you. Is I saw that it was when you were doing the demo, Kelly. You were testing out 2 blocks, and only one of them was installed. When I was testing that out a bit, I actually never got to that point that in the process of how I did my content, I obviously tricked the block directory not to know that it needs to uninstall something. So what do I need to think about there?
Yeah, that flow is also definitely something that needs to be improved. Like this is still where you can kind of see the initial version edges, I'd say. So that will work if you don't refresh the page in the time between you start installing blocks and then you publish your page or you save your draft. Just for technical reasons, the way it hooks into the editor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm still kind of old school, that I want to put something in there, save it, and then preview it. And that's the moment where I'm probably going to fool the block directory. It doesn't know that I actually don't want it, because in the published version, it's not in there, but that's not where it kind of hooks in. Okay.
Yeah, so it doesn't, like when you load up the editor, it has no way of knowing what plugins you've installed in that you want and what ones you're just trying out. So that's the issue you're running into. Yeah.
So I can see a flag feature coming up.
Something like that. We've talked about a few different ways of approaching this, and that's another one that will just continue to be improved.
Yeah, I saw a few explorations, I said, on the design for the sidebar at one point, to have an overview of which plugin were installed in that session. Mm-hmm. And then to maybe uninstall them not automatically, but on user interaction.
Yeah, if you save the draft, it should uninstall any plugins that you haven't used yet. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that was also the question that William Patton had. At one point, does the uninstall actually happen? That's on the save.
On save, yeah.
On save, yeah.
Either publish or save draft, either, as long as you're saving the post.
So it's not the autosave, it's the save as draft kind of thing.
I'm not sure. Sorry.
Well, then you really need to kind of be really fast with your decision.
It doesn't, I'm pretty sure it doesn't run on autosave, but I actually am not sure.
Well, I'm pretty sure it doesn't, because autosave is on my site, it's kind of every 15 seconds, and I'm not that fast in my decision making, but yeah.
Oh, it wouldn't uninstall the block if it's in your editor, though. So if you're using it, it's not going to disappear on you.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Oh, I had hoped that it wouldn't. Yeah. So any more question? Going once, going twice. Wow, this was awesome. We had some great questions here from the audience. Thank you for Bud and Susanna and John. And William. We are pretty much at the end of the show, but at this point I have 2 more questions for you, Alex, Otto, and Kelly. So do you have any announcements or tips and tricks that you couldn't get in before that you want people to keep in mind about that? And if people want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way? So I said, Otto, Alex, Kelly.
One thing I'd love to mention is that we've got 80 odd blocks in the directory at the moment, which is fantastic. But we'd love to hear more from developers, plugin developers, and so on, who are trying to get their blocks in or wondering how to develop these. So yeah, you can always, if nothing else, you can find us in the Meta channel on Slack. And I'm sure you'll have some links in the show notes to the guidelines and some of the tutorials and things that are available. Yeah,
we'll put them together. There was a well, I'm gonna come back to that question. Oh, is the plugin the plugin team? Do you have on the plugin team, Otto, some bandwidth to reach out to some of the plugin developers that have already kind of block collections in there, or other single block plugins that didn't make it yet?
Some of them have asked us about that. If you're a plugin developer and you have questions about the best way, advice, how to get in the block directory, feel free to email the plugins team. It's plugins@wordpress.org. Email is the best way to contact the plugins review team. That goes to our Help Scout inbox, and all of the different team members can review it and read it, and we can pass it along to each other. And a lot of these collection plugins have been asking how to get in there. Our general answer is to make them not collection plugins right now. Single block plugins are the easiest way. They're small, they're easy, they fit right in. But for some of them, that may not be the best way. So basically just ask. It never hurts to ask, you know. And plugins@wordpress.org is the best way to get into contact with the plugins review team.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Otto. Kelly? Sure. Do you have anything that you want the people to know that I wasn't able to ask you?
I would have probably just said the same as Alex, that I would love to hear from people who are trying to develop blocks, or maybe if you're running into issues, to come hang out in Slack, or I want to hear what people are having problems with so that we can make it better. So that's my thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think quite a few discussions are happening on GitHub as well. Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody have issues, that's you're also developing on GitHub, right? Or is it well, MetaTrack or GitHub?
Yeah,
all of those things. It's okay. It's all over the place.
It's a big combo. There's a lot of things happening. So yeah.
Put it somewhere where people can see it. Yeah.
But it's all coordinated in Slack. So if you just join the Slack, somebody will tell you what's going on.
All right. Well, this is awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight or this morning. And it was great to learn from you and see what this new feature is doing for the WordPress ecosystem as a whole. Big thank you also to the viewers with all the awesome questions. And if you have more questions, you can always send them also to me via email at pauli@gutenbergtimes.com. That's PAULI@gutenbergtimes.com. The recording of the show is available in a few minutes on our YouTube channel, and we'll publish the transcript in a few days on the gutenbergtimes.com. I also will add the links to the YouTube description while we don't have a posted on the Gutenberg Times. Thanks again, Kelly, Alex, Otto. It was a privilege to have you on the show, and a great joy talking to you. Goodbye and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, William. William says, thanks for the discussion tonight. It'll be annoying with questions in Slack. Ha ha ha. Yeah, that's a thread. You all take care. Bye.